from the lab to the deeper questions of how we live and understand ourselves. My guest today is Dr. Jose Angel Moreno Cabezuelo.
Thanks, Aki, for this opportunity. I am a scientist. I work in Oxford in the UK, and I spend most of my days studying tiny organisms that most people have never even heard of. They are called cyanobacteria. They live in the ocean and lakes, and they do something extraordinary. They take carbon dioxide, the waste gas that come in from our cars, the factories, and so much of human activity, and using sunlight, transform it in oxygen. Huge part of the air that we are breathing right now exists because of this microscopic organism. So my work is, in many ways, about studying the smallest, most invisible form of life on Earth, the ones that nobody notices, but they are sustaining everything. So the force that keep us alive are not always the loudest or the most visible, and that became one of the deepest seeds of my book. Because, Aggie, I spent years studying the brain, how the neuron talks to each other, how the hormones control our mood, how the stress is able to change the body. But then I have a big loss. My father died, and with all of my training, all of my knowledge, I felt something deep. Because I could explain everything that was happening inside of my body, the chemistry, which part of the brain was activated. And that is when I realized something. Knowing how life works and knowing how to live, those are completely different things. Because science gives you the mechanism, but it doesn't give to you the meaning. So I was needing both. So I went looking for that, and I went when I was trying to find this book that combine these two areas, I didn't find it. So I sat down and I decided to wrote it. So, Aggie, let me share something with your listener. In the next 30 minutes that we are going to be here, while we are having this beautiful conversation, your heart is going to beat around maybe 2,500 times, and you will notice a single of them. You will be thinking about in another thing, and it will just keep going. So think about this for a second. There is a system inside you that is 100% dedicated to keep you alive, and it just works. And that is where my book begins, with a simple but very powerful truth, that many things that sustain us operated quietly in the background. So we are training to look for what is missing, what is broken, what needs fixing. But sometimes the deeper wisdom is to notice what is already already present, already carrying us. So
The inner wisdom is certainly within us. I think that's the word I would use. And you said about how life works, those two things that made an impression, the way that you said it, how we live our life, which are not the same thing. The thing I would like, because you mentioned those the microorganisms that you study, and I want to direct or discuss really the something that I read that intrigued me very much, and that's you talk about not a brain as one, as many people consider that there is one brain, but three centers of intelligence. So I would like to discuss this with you, and we will connect it later on about how that influences our decision, because obviously if there are three parts or three centers of intelligence, and most people utilize only one most of the time anyway, which is their rational mind,
yes.
the rational brain, then there is definitely some lots of information missing. So let's talk about this concept, and we will unpack it from there.
Yes, Aggie, thanks. This is something that blew my mind when I learned it, and I think I will surprise your listener too. because we all grow learning that the brain is made by neurons, right? So the neurons are the star, the main character. So they carry our thoughts, or memories, or feeling. But here is the thing. Roughly half of the cells in your brains are not neurons. There are something called glial cells, and for decades, the science completely ignored them. They treated them like a packaging material, no? Because then we discovered that these packaging cells are actually running the show, because they control how neurons communicate, they clean up waste, they protect the whole system. Without them, the neurons cannot function. So half of the brain was invisible, and not because it was hidden, it's because nobody thought that it doesn't matter. There is sometimes, the elements that truly sustain us are the ones that remain invisible. So the point that you mentioned about the 3 point of the intelligence, this is something really exciting, because the intelligence that we ignore is not just in the brain. It is expressed about the whole body. Let me explain this in a way that I think that will change your listener see themselves. We'll know the brain number one is the one in your head, in the skull. And it's the one that analyze, that make lists, it is worried. We'll know this brain very well. However, the brain number two is in your gut. Yes, you are hearing well, in your belly. And it is not a metaphor, because your digestive system has its own nervous system with over 500 million of neurons. So scientists literally is calling this the second brain. And this part is fascinating, because your gut is producing around the 90% of your serotonin. The serotonin is the molecule that makes you feel calm, makes you feel content, at peace. And it is, think about that, it is not made in your head, it is made in your belly. So when someone say, I have, a gut feeling, this is not just a saying, this is a real biology, because your gut is literally processing information and producing the chemistry of well-being. And here is the most interesting part. The brain number three is in your head. And it is one of the things that still amazes me, because your head has about 40,000 neurons. And the most interesting thing is, here is the thing that nobody expects. The head sends far more signal up to the brain than the brain sends down to the head. So the communication is mostly in one way. Your head is talking all the time to your brain all the time. So your brain is barely answering. So what do this mean in the real life? No? So the meaning is when you sit down to make an important decision, for example, which job to take, or for example, leaving a relationship, to start something new, make a list. Make a list with the pros and the cons. You think it about this, and you have this feeling that you cannot decide. So I think that it is not an indecision. This is one brain trying to do the work of three. So you are using the head and ignoring the gut or the head. Two members of your team, and I think like there is like to explain this, are sitting in the room with their hand raised, and you are not letting them to speak.
So why do most people not let them speak? I suppose the answer is because they can't see them or hear them clearly. So the question that immediately arises is, how can one use their heart and their gut brain in a way that they, I like the metaphor of keeping their hands up. So how we can direct our attention there and say, okay, let's hear what you have to say.
I will, so many people ask me about this, like when I was discovering this. So the thing that I did is like putting example on my book. So exactly how exactly to do this. So for example, Aggie, in my book, I create two characters, okay, that represent this. Paula is the person who lives entirely in the brain, number one, the head. So she's a scientist, she's brilliant, she can explain exactly how the anxiety works, and she cannot stop in herself. She gets paralyzed by her own intelligence. And then there is another girl, Fania, Honey, however, lost her parent in a car accident. So she grew up in an orphanage where she was treated with real cruelty, but her parents, who were philosopher teachers, had given her something before that. They raised her on Stoic philosophy, the idea that you cannot control what happened to you, but you always control how you respond. So their friendship become like a dialogue, science and philosophy, curiosity and wisdom, understanding and resilience. And I think that every person listening right now has both of them inside. The part that analyzes everything and the part that is already knows the answer. So most of us had that had the power to the power. I think most of have been giving all the power to Paula's side of all the entire careers. However, the Fania side has been winning. So I want one of a very easy thing, like for example, a very easy exercise for your audience. So there is like very simple that people can do. So next time that you face a decision that feels heavy, but it doesn't need to be huge, just something that carry weight, I think that we need to try this. Say the decision, like for example, load. I am going to do this. And then 2 seconds after that, you say, like, think, notice what is happening in your body. Does your chest tighten or open? Or does your stomach clench or relax? So I think that it is like the brain 2 and the brain 3 voting. So they already processed the information. They already know. You just need to listen. And most of the people decide first and feel the body reaction week later. And this reverses the order. Body first, mind second.
So this is great. And what I highlighted from that, the last thing that you were saying about noticing what is happening in the body before the decision is taken, and because that is really the power that it can have in our decision making. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that? Specifically, it requires a certain level of awareness to be able to, detach from the constant, let's say, power of that the rational mind has over most people. So you need the self-awareness to step out of that for a moment in order to observe the other two centers. So I would like your comment on that particular element of, self-awareness at that time when you need it the most, like in decisions. Like,
Yes. For this case, I would like to describe a feeling, and I think that I want your listener to tell me when they hear that, if they recognize it. For example, I am going to put this example on the table. You have worked hard, right? You have built your career. You have achieved things that you are genuinely very proud of. And then one day, maybe at 40, maybe 45, you wake up and the fires feel different, right? Not broken, just quiet. The thing that you that used to drive you, for example, the next promotion, the next goal, they don't hit the same way anymore. And you are start asking a question that scare you. Is this everything? And the words tell you, reinvent yourself, find a new passion. I want to offer a completely, there are so many things, but I want to offer something different. Because the neuroscience, Aggie, is fascinating. Your brain is always updating. Like a phone, like for example, installing a new software, it might feel slow for a while, but it is actually getting smart, getting every time like getting smarter. So your brain has the ability to rewire itself through your entire life, no? New connection, new pathway. The scientists call this neuroplasticity, and this is real. There is one scientist called Bruce Lipton. He has like a very beautiful book. Book is called The Biology of Belief. So he is a cell biologist who influenced my own thinking a lot. So he saw something very, very powerful. Our cells don't just respond to the genes, they respond to the environment, like including our own environment, our thoughts, our belief, our emotion. In other words, the story that you tell yourself about your life can actually change how your body works. And there is another called Joe Dispenza that took that further. He showed that the thought that you repeat like every day create like a physical pathway in your brain, like walking through a field of tall grass. So the first time is hard, right? The 10th time there is a trail. The 100th time there is a road. That is like what your habits are, roads in your brain. So the good news is like you can build the new roads. Doesn't matter the age. The brain is always allowed it. And there is a specific part in the brain that becomes more active in the midlife. That it is like very interesting for your listening. The science calls it the default mode network, but I don't want to make this complex. To make it simple, it's the system that switch on when you are very not busy. When you are, like, for example, studying window, when you are in the shower, when your mind wanders. So for years, the scientists thought that this is just the brain being lazy, just doing nothing. But now we know that it is doing the most important thing. It is like reviewing all the time your entire life. So it's comparing the person that you plan to be with the person that actually become. And when there is a gap, it sends to you a signal. And this signal usually feel like something is missing. It is your brain telling you the old software has finished. It is like, for example, time for another day. So one of the things that I think that could be practical, like, for example, to the thing that we were talking, to be more aware about that, is a thing that helped me a lot. Is for 1 week, like, for example, we're going to take one small notebook, and every time that you notice something that grabs your attention, a topic, for example, an article, a conversation that made you feel more alive than usual, just write it down. Don't judge it. Just write it down. And after 7 days, look at the list. And Aggie, I promise you will see patterns. And those patterns are not random. They are your brain showing you the work is already being doing, like, in the background. Maybe for years you don't need to invent a new path, a new direction. You just need to read what is your brain is already written.
This thank you for reminding me of this practice of writing things like these kinds of the thoughts or the ideas or the feelings that come in those times in the day that we are relaxed. We are this morning when I was having a shower, I did have a very interesting idea that I had not thought of it before. And I know the power of being able to take action towards those things, but because there can be a lot, so writing them down gives you then an opportunity to filter them, or for me, most importantly, to remember them. Because if I don't write it down or take some action towards it, tomorrow I won't even remember that this happened. So I think that is a great practice for someone
Absolutely.
to do and realize those patterns. So that's my take of the exercise. It's a very, very useful. I don't know if you want to add anything to that before I move on, and there is something else I want to ask you that is quite interesting. But if you want to add anything to what we were just saying.
Yeah, you can ask me whatever you want, and if you know, I will continue like working with some more interesting thing.
It's it's something that you mentioned earlier. You were talking about our gut that produces 90% of the serotonin, which comes to a surprise to many people. It came to me. I didn't expect to hear this high number. And what I would like to ask you and make this differentiation, because I think it is important for many people that do have, some success, but they do not feel fulfillment, or doing the things that are pleasurable, but they don't feel happy. So I think with my understanding is that there are two different chemicals that are responsible for those two different situations or states. The one is dopamine, the other is serotonin. So when you said about the gut brain producing the most of the serotonin, I think that gave me the idea to look for that more and connect with that more to produce this feeling of happiness rather than pleasure, if I can use these two words. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So let me ask you something. Do you remember the first time that you achieved something big?
Yes, I don't know if it was the first time, but one of the first times for sure. Let's say when I went to university back in Greece, I was 17.
So do you remember how that felt? It was incredible, right? And now, like the second achievement, how did that feel? You say like it's good, but not as much, right? So by the third, the fourth, the fifth, it was just expecting, and you needed something like bigger to feel this, to feel the same thing like the first time. And this is barely chemistry, because your brain has a molecule called dopamine, and dopamine is the molecule of wanting, because it gives you a rush when you chase something and you are already getting it. But after that, what happens? That it drops. And to get the same rush, the next time, you need like a bigger hit. So always bigger. It is like, in order to explain this that all people can understand, it is like an staircase that it is like keeping like going up and never reach the top. Here is the trap. Because our entire culture is built on this staircase. For example, the social media, the career culture, advertising, everything is designed to keep you wanting the next thing, the next. It's like a reward loop. We call ambition, but what is the meaning of this in a chemical level? It's just a loop, because a lot of from my experience, a lot of successful people that I know don't burn out because they fail. They burn out because they keep achieving things that stop meaning anything. And the other molecule, that there is a completely different chemical system in your body, is a molecule called serotonin. And again, serotonin plays by the opposite rules. Because serotonin doesn't activate when you get something. It's activate when you give something. When you connect with another person. When you do something that feels meaningful. So, and what is the thing that we were talking about? 95% of your serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain. So that feeling of deep contentment, of being at peace with yourself, is literally a gut feeling. So now here is what I find beautiful. There is not only this discovery in modern science, because 2,500 years ago, the Buddhist tradition already said that sufferings come from chasing what we don't have. And also we can see this in the Stoic philosopher in the ancient Rome, say that peace comes from focusing on what you can control instead of you cannot control. And also the Taoist tradition in China talk about the art of not forcing, a philosophy called Wu Wei, that means like letting things come naturally. And we are seeing like different civilizations, centuries, language, and the same conclusion. And now we can prove this with we have brain scan in order to prove this. And also, Aggie, like I love to put a lot of example and exercise. I would like to say to the audience tonight, before you going to sleep, ask yourself just two questions. One, what I did today that feel exciting in the moment but left me feeling empty? Maybe just scrolling with your phone for an hour, maybe just saying yes to something just to stay busy. And two, what I did today that wasn't exciting, but left me with the feeling generally good. Maybe it was a real conversation with someone. Maybe it was just, like helping a friend. Maybe just, for example, like in a day with, like today, like sitting in the sun for 5 minutes. So the first list is your dopamine. And the second list is your serotonin. So you don't need to change anything tonight. The thing that you need to do is sitting. You will analyze the list and see which list is longer. So this is the starting point. Because at the moment that you set a pattern with awareness, you have already started changing your brain. And this is like the power of the neuroplasticity, because you haven't done anything yet. And then all the time, the rewiring has already begun.
I like that exercise very much, and I actually like the distinction. How did it left me feeling afterwards? And I think we can all relate of doing something that felt good for a while or at the moment, and then we felt empty or drained, or
Absolutely.
what do I do now? And I think that's a very good distinction on realizing the difference and reflecting on it. I would even add to that to write it down, because it is it gives you the opportunity to reflect. Jose, I would like also to ask you briefly about your book. Basically, I wanted to tell you who is your book for, who would really benefit of reading it. It's Heartbeats of Consciousness.
Yes, this book is made for a person, one of the things that I was, when I was trying to all my make my career, I was trying to find a book that connects philosophy, science in a way that you can understand, that you can, because most of the thing that I am seeing today, whether it's like the scientist, is like explain the thing in a very complex way. So I try in a way to connect philosophy and science in a way that you can understand a lot of very difficult, complex definition of science, and also you can understand how the life works, like from all of the things that I explained about the molecule, explain in a story about two friends that go to the uni, and through the journey that they are having, I introduce a lot of things that is happening. I don't want to do a lot of spoiler, but it's connecting science, philosophy in a very easy way to understand. And at the end, there is something meaningful and something that, and I explain everything with metaphor. And one of the things that I explain is something that I would like to use to close this conversation, because one of the things that I wrote in the book, stay with me, is in one of the chapters, the two main characters, Paula and Fania, do an experiment in the laboratory. They recreate the chemical reaction that happens inside of a firefly. So this organism that produces light. So they watch the light appearing. So the science is like very beautiful, but here, Aggie, the science is not the point, because fireflies don't produce light for themselves. They can see perfectly in the dark. The light is not a tool. The light is a message, because every flash is a signal that they send to the darkness that say, "Hey, I am here. Can you see me?" And I think this about us, about the people that listen right now, because every person carries something inside that could change someone else's life, something learned through years of experience, through pain, through quiet growth that nobody saw, knowledge, creativity, for example, kindness, curiosity, and that is your light. But that light only matters, I think, like if you share it. Because in the book, the student that I described learned that we are like a society of cells, because think about that. We are like billions of cells cooperating to keep one body alive. But I think that there is a deeper truth. Because we are a society of cells, but we are also a society of light. And in some part of the world, something magical happened because thousands of fireflies across an entire river begin to flash at exactly the same time, with the same ring, same direction, just individual light, and each one paying attention to the light around them and adjusting until an entire forest is pulsing together. And nobody tell them how to do it, it just happened because each one does something very simple. They are paying attention, adjust, and suddenly you are part of something much bigger than yourself. So I think that is what personal growth really is. Just this, paying attention what is inside of you, adjusting, and being willing to show your light, even when you have no idea who is watching, because the loneliest feeling in the world is carrying a light inside of you and keep it hidden. And the most beautiful feeling, I think, is when you finally just let it out and someone somewhere in the dark respond, no. I think this is like the most beautiful thing. So the books end with the two characters building something together. It's a school where science, the science of the earth, and philosophy meet. And I don't know if this will ever have doors, okay? But I believe it begins every time that someone chooses to be real about who they are. And at the end of the book, I wrote 10 promises to myself, and I want to share just the first one. I don't want to do this like very long. So I say, don't let anything that happens outside you destroy what lives inside you. And Aggie, I fail at this all the time, because some morning the overthinking wins. Some night all grief comes back, and all I can do is sit with it until it passes. But I keep making the promise, because every time I do, the pathway in my brain is like getting like a little stronger. And this is neuroscience. Like the repetition builds who you become. Aggie, if there is one question I hope your listener carry then after today's, how do we want to live while our heart is still beating? Because every heartbeat reminds us that the time is passing, but also remind us we still get to choose what we do with it. And maybe this is the most beautiful thing about being alive.
This is a very empowering message, and thank you for concluding with that. And the story, with the fireflies is a very beautiful metaphor for what we do. So I will, end with the same message. Let's shine our light, each of us, to the world for, the betterment of the world, for the elevation of human consciousness, for our purpose, what we must bring into the world by our own life and existence. So such a beautiful message to end today with.
Thank you.
Jose, thank you very much for this conversation. It has been very useful, and I believe the exercises that you mentioned are very important and great tools for one to live more fulfilled, as I think we would all like to. So thank you so much again for this conversation.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to be with you discussing this.